Hello, my name is Norman Katz. My company is Katzscan Incorporated, and welcome to Execute to Excellence. Next slide. That's me. For those who are looking at this through the internet as this is being recorded, I am a solo flyer business owner. I am a consultant. I am a U.S. national and international speaker, writer, multiple book author. And as I tell my audiences, I am a fencer. I've been fencing since 1993, coaching in my own little club since 2007. If anybody here in the audience knows anything about fencing, there are three competitive weapons: foil, epee, and saber. I am a foil and saber fencer. I will fence epee if somebody puts one in my hand. And an interesting note about my fencing, I am ambidextrous. I fence both left-handed and right-handed. I am naturally right-handed, but I taught myself to fence left-handed. Normally, if we were presenting in person and we were together, I would caution any hecklers in the front row to be on guard. I am not that tall, but I do have a very long lunge. But since this is being recorded and we are over the internet, and I know that everybody else is on mute, it's not as much of a problem right now. So sit back and enjoy the presentation nonetheless. Next slide. So I am the author of three exclusive one-of-a-kind books. My first on detecting and reducing supply chain fraud. My second one on supply chain vendor compliance. And I did bring up the fact that I'm a fencer because my third book is a mix of my profession and my personal passion, which is business performance through the perspective of a fencer, where I use fencing strategies and tactics to explain a myriad of business performance issues that I have experienced through my career. Each of my books, as you can see, has their own website. And so I invite you to take a look, and you can certainly order any of my books through their respective websites. Next slide. A little bit about my consulting. I focus on supply chain performance and business process improvement. I am a relationship champion, helping the companies that I assist with their customer relationships and downstream supply chain relationships with software vendors, contract manufacturers, and distributors. I help define strategic vision and then the implementation through the tactical execution. I am an expert in the core supply chain software of enterprise resource planning, electronic data interchange, and barcode labeling and scanning. And since I did start my career as a programmer analyst, and IT manager, I still use my data mastery and analytic skills to help really dig into the data and extract meaningful information for my clients. Excuse me. I have been in business now. We are recording this in January 2021. So I am celebrating my 25-year anniversary. Next slide, please. So the premise of this presentation, currently, and this has been happening more and more, products and services are really commoditized. You know, brand names are really an afterthought. You know, as long as we acquire products and services from companies that we believe to be reputable, we really don't care as much anymore. And so, you know, that has caused lookalike retailers to shutter their stores. And, you know, unfortunately, customer service has really denigrated into customer risk management. How much can we just anger a customer until they finally leave us for somebody else that has a comparable product or service? I mean, truly, you know, especially on services, whether it's electricians, plumbers, you know, lawn service, you know, pest control services, these are all just commodity services anymore. Folks who, even folks who cut our hair. I mean, we really care more about the people rather than the companies themselves. And so, especially with private labeling anymore, brands just don't necessarily matter as long as we think that we can trust who we're buying from. And so, now, especially with the internet, bad news travels faster than good news. And with the cost of customer acquisition versus customer retention, it really is much more important to retain our good customers and let our good customers tell more people about how much they love our products and services, rather than letting bad news spread faster. So in a commoditized world, execution is the new competitive edge, all else being equal in quality products and services. Next slide. In now talking about execution, we really have to define goals versus objectives and what goals and objectives really, should be. So, goals, how do you win it? How do you win as a fencer? How do I win a fencing bout? My objective is to win, but my goal is to score more touches, more points before my opponent. So the goals have shorter perspectives and are more tactical rather than the objectives, which are a longer perspective and therefore more strategic. So the goal of let's make a lot of money is not something that people can really gravitate to, and is not something really, good and attainable. But a goal of order fulfillment precision is something that we can all appreciate because we've all really suffered from it. The goal of good customer satisfaction is something that people can really gravitate to because we can all appreciate it. And the objectives will lead to what is good for our business. We will have increased revenue. We will have good customer retention. I like the goal of transparency because I think it leads to credibility. I like the goal of quality because I think it leads to good customer loyalty. So in executing towards excellence, it is very important to define good, attainable, achievable goals and let them lead to the objectives that we want. Next slide, please. You execute from the inside out. What can your company do really well right now to earn revenue? And what are your business processes, whether they're good or bad? And if they're bad, let's go ahead and make them good. You want to build data for the current and the future states, and make sure that you write for you and your customers, and I should say, and your suppliers, if you're defining downstream supply chain requirements. So, don't make your issues your customers' problems, as the slide says. If you're going to create, how-to instructions, make sure that your customers can understand them, so your customers are not having to contact your customer service and drive up operating costs because your customer service department is overwhelmed and you just need more customer service. Okay, that's not really good execution. Next slide, please. Understand that you will have two primary business cycles. I am a one-person company, and I have these two primary business cycles. I have customers and I provide services, and so I essentially have sales orders where I deliver my consulting services, I generate invoices, and I get paid. Whether it's web hosting or cellular service from the vendors that I choose, even if they're directly billed to my credit cards, somehow, some way there is a quote unquote purchase order involved, with receipts and even the direct billing is something of I still get an invoice, and even the direct billing against my credit card is the payment that is sent. So understand that that part of your great execution is the fact that you have to understand your two primary business cycles, and that your path along these business cycles has got to be very, very well transacted, and the data that you set up to execute these business cycles has got to be spot on. So next slide, please. When we talk about data, understand that the data that you set up in your software will have characteristics. Customers, vendors, items, sales reps, systems users. Will have names, descriptions, geographic locations. They can be categorized, put into families, groups, classes. So this is how we start to draw meaningful information and analytics out of our software, is how we describe the information that we put in. Next slide, please. Transactions have attributes. The date and time and the user that initiated the transaction, the device that the transaction was initiated on in the world today, whether it was on a computer or a mobile device, or a tablet, matters. So it is the characteristics and the attributes that really make up our ability to perform the advanced analytics that we can do out of our business software. Next slide, please. And the business software that I'm talking about is the fact that in order for a company to execute, you will need an ERP system. Whether it's QuickBooks, NetSuite, something like Microsoft Navision, as you grow, Oracle, SAP, whatever the software is. But an ERP system is the business system of record. It allows you to account, as it says, for what is operationally happening. I rail against the description of ERP systems as accounting systems only, because they are not. They are systems that allow you to, again, account for what is operationally happening. I have written that you could strip away the accounting side of an ERP system and still operate your company. So you would not necessarily want to do that because of the financial implications, the tax reporting. But an ERP system is two halves of a whole. So as you can see from the graphic, it is not just where your accounting information is. It is where you store your entities and your operations and your transactions. So this is the core system of record. And if you don't get the data right, you will not be able to extract meaningful information out. So this is why I'm taking a little bit of time, because from an executional standpoint, the ERP system is critically important. Next slide, please. From a project management standpoint, and I've heard very, very bad stories here. Project management means balancing the process with the product. Whether the product is a thing or it is a software system, if the process overtakes the project, the process is out of control. The project must prevail, and process success does not equate to project success. And this is very, very important. So in ensuring that you are executing correctly and driving towards excellence, if you let the process overtake the outcome, then yes, you can say that your process was a success, but if you're not delivering what your customers require, and your customers may be internal or they may be external to the organization, then your project was not a success. So this is critically important in project management to ensure that you allow the process to guide you, but not overtake what is going on. Next slide, please. Your logo is really your image. My brand is really how I execute what I do. And so don't confuse the two. It is, my brand is really what I do and also what I don't do. You know, in my 25 years now in business, I have also turned down project work because it was not in my repertoire of expertise in what I do. And I've been complimented for that. So make sure that you don't take on more than what you're really prepared to take on. Especially at the current time, you may grow into certain work, whether it's products or services. But as great as your logo might be, you will be known, really, your reputation for how you execute. And I think that that's an important distinction. Next slide, please. So what is execution? It is everything. It is what is tangible within your organization, from data to processes to how you communicate to your partnerships. But I want to stress that it's also intangible. It is those intangible things on the list: integrity, morals, ethics, values, principles, and the leadership of your organization. And this is not just me getting on a soapbox and spouting off these things, but this is very, very important to understand. Next slide, please. The failures of companies like WorldCom and Enron were executional failures at the highest levels of these major corporations. And they spurred the creation of the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations and the Treadway Commission. And the result here was COSO and the 5 key aspects of the COSO good governance framework. And if you're looking for a framework to follow for good governance, good guidance, good execution, I really discovered COSO while I was writing my first book. And I think it's just a great encompassing framework. The control environment is also known as the tone at the top, which essentially is leadership. And if you don't have good leadership, values, ethics, morals, good guidance, you will not have a good organization. The risk assessment says that you must look at risks internal and external to the organization and know how to address these risks. The control activities are your policies and procedures for how to do what is done within the organization on a regular basis. Information and communication can be summed up as who needs to know what and when. Too soon, too late, no good. Monitoring activities are the checks and balances to make sure that what is going on a regular basis is up to date and current, and if not, is made to be up to date and current. So a great framework to use for good execution. Next slide, please. There are also, in my opinion, new execution benchmarks. No longer are people satisfied in not delving into, for example, aspects of the supply chain from a sustainability standpoint. People want to know that companies are sustainable in their supply chains from an environmental standpoint, and also not using forced labor in their supply chains. And so, for example, knowthechain.org addresses forced labor in supply chains and brings out that transparency. I discovered Ethisphere while I was writing my first book on supply chain fraud. And Ethisphere highlights ethical businesses and showcases how ethically run businesses actually outperform their peers on the stock market. And companies that achieve Ethisphere recognition, I have noticed, actually use that recognition in their advertisements. So it's quite a big deal. So realistically, there are new execution benchmarks and recognition that that companies are really focused on today. Next slide, please. So, realistically, execution is the essence of the whole experience, I think. As I say, from getting there to being there, I think that it's every touch point for your organization. How your organization interacts with the community, with its customers, with its employees, with its investors, with potential investors, with suppliers, contract manufacturers and distributors, software vendors. So I think that you have to look at how your organization interacts with all engaged entities and say, are we doing the right job? And can we do better? And so to me, execution is just all encompassing. And I think that as startup companies and growing companies, once you start correctly on this path, then it will lay out the right foundation for the future upon which to grow. Next slide, please. I only had 20 minutes today. I want to thank everybody for your valuable time. I can be reached through my website for more information. And again, thank you all very much. I hope you found this very informative. Take care.